of War has become one of the most popular shooters of this console generation. There's just one problem. The last game wrapped up the trilogy. Solution? They made a prequel. Gears of War Judgement takes us back to the days following first contact on Emergence Day.
Stay here and defend this area. The East Wing is getting hammered.
The first thing you notice is the default heroes Marcus and Dom are missing from this game. This story focuses on Baird and Cole and their role in the first conflict.
Move, Lieutenant Baird.
For those not up to speed on their Gears lore, on Emergence Day, humanity was blindsided by an invasion force of monsters. Except instead of arriving in spaceships, they tunneled up from underground.
We got a healing canvas!
The problem is the military dismissed the Locust as a small threat. However, Baird and his Kilo team know the real danger, and they try and stop them the only way they know how, by disobeying orders and blowing stuff up. Hex, did you miss Marcus, and how did you find the focus on Baird?
I mean, the thing about Gears characters is that they're all production line beefcakes. They've just swapped out one guy with more muscles for brains with another, except he wears goggles instead of Marcus's bandana.
Does that sound about right to you, Lieutenant Baird?
And occasionally one of them gets upset about his dead wife.
Baird still kicks down every door, yells a lot, and shoots everything in sight, and the dialogue is as cheesy as ever.
So this is the UIR sniper rifle.
This isn't a gun! It's a comrade.
But you know what, Badge? We've never really looked to Gears of War for in-depth characterization, have we?
No, in fact, whenever they have tried to develop characters or make an interesting story moment, it always comes across a bit silly and out of place. But this game looked incredible, doesn't it? If you think about the 360, it's 7-year-old technology now, and yet they still make these games look better with each iteration. You'll get to fight in some huge war-torn locations, and there's a bit of a World War II vibe at play, with this mission evoking the bombing of London. Plus, this level is clearly inspired by the famous Omaha Beach landing. And despite all of this intense action, I found myself getting distracted by some exquisite architecture. Obviously from the Georgian era.
Well, predates the Georgian era, I think.
Bit of Art Deco. Or distracted by a nice sunset. Oh, look at that. Isn't that nice?
Oh, that's just pretty. You and your 4-person Kilo squad will carve your way through thousands of locusts, usually with bullets, but sometimes your gun's chainsaw is needed. He had to split. Yeah, as Running Man? Yeah, okay.
A big clip of bullets and your combat roll are your best friends here. And when you do want a bit of protection from bullets, you can always grab an enemy's riot shield, or grab an enemy as an inhumane shield.
Don't worry, I'm right behind you.
A lot of the tougher breeds of enemies that we only saw in the third game appear here in the past, especially those freaking centipedes, which I hate. And Judgment introduces new weapons and enemies, which will of course inexplicably disappear in the later games. New guns include this quasi-sniper rifle. It packs plenty of power but doesn't have a scope, so you'll need to shoot from the hip.
I think that was the right move to introduce new weapons and enemies and ignore the continuity stuff there, but when it comes to the story, I wish that was immune to it because it's so overly complicated. It keeps flip-flopping back and forth from Baird's military trial, where the team are giving their testimonies, to the missions which are playable flashbacks. Plus, there are some missions set in the past and some set in the future. In Gears of War 3, I just couldn't keep up with it all.
Yeah, the plot certainly loses its way in the middle, although those courtroom testimonies do offer up an interesting gameplay twist. At the start of each mission, you'll have the choice of testimonial challenges. In one, the Kilo squad claimed the Locusts use advanced flanking tactics. If you choose to accept the challenge and back up their claims, you'll face waves of extra enemies attacking you from behind.
They are clever additions, although I think a lot of people will save it for the second playthrough because they often put restrictions on it with time limits or specific weapons. These challenges also tie into the new rating system. You're scored at the end of each mission. Do lots of skillful stuff like headshots and executions, and you'll gain points. Plus, taking on those testimony challenges gives you a big score bump. But you do lose points every time you fall in battle and need to be revived by a teammate.
I mean, it's not like the gameplay itself lacks challenge. I mean, we often found ourselves in situations where we were surrounded by boss-sized enemies and defeat was almost certain. It's just that every time we failed, one of our AI buddies would pick us back up again. It's just so hard to get engaged in a game when there aren't serious consequences.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's only if you care about the points that it's really going to matter if you go down and need that revival. And you can always put it up to insane difficulty.
Yeah, but insane difficulty is only unlocked once you finish the game. And, you know, I shouldn't have to impose rules on myself, like no revives, to get a good challenge out of it. That said, I do think the game was more balanced when we played in co-op.
Oh, what's that?
That thing is massive! I think you just turn around.
Yeah, baby. Oh, through the ground. Relax, everyone. Hex, help. Help.
Die,
Help. Hex, help.
die,
Oh, it's
die.
alright. Now, because we were playing before release, we couldn't test out much of the multiplayer, but we did get to jump into a couple of matches. The main new addition is the Overrun mode. It's an extension of the Horde mode, except human players can now jump onto both sides and play as Locust and Cog in the same match. I find quite often when you get to play as the non-human characters in these kind of games, the controls are always really wonky or not ironed out properly, but everything here felt tight, and there's a lot to get your head around.
I love being that suicide bug. What a jerk. For death and glory.
But we should wrap this up. Final thoughts, Hex?
Well, there's no denying this is a solid game. I mean, it looks amazing and the action is constantly dialed up to 11. It just all feels a little bit too familiar, I think. You know, we've had the trilogy and the prequel. I think they need to really shift this into something quite different if they want to continue this franchise. So I'm giving it 8.
Yeah, I agree. There aren't really big changes here, but it is more Gears, and the Gears that is here is good Gears. So I'm giving it 8.5.